The cherry pie arrived on a Tuesday morning with a note that read, "I made this just for you, Margaret. Hope you love it as much as I loved making it. Nora." Sweet, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. I set it on my kitchen counter and went to brew some coffee. You know, the whole ritual of preparing for what I thought would be a lovely afternoon treat. That's when Max, my golden retriever, decided to be his usual food-obsessed self and jumped up to sneak a bite. 5 minutes later, he was on my kitchen floor, panting like he'd run a marathon, drooling everywhere and shaking like a leaf. I've never moved so fast in my life. Scooped up all 70 pounds of him and raced to the emergency vet, my heart pounding harder than his. Dr. Rodriguez took one look at Max and rushed him into the back. "What did he eat?" she asked, and when I told her about the pie, her face went white. The blood tests came back 2 hours later. Poison. Someone had tried to kill my dog. Or more accurately, someone had tried to kill me. And Max saved my life by being a greedy little hero. When I discovered what was really in that cherry pie, 30 minutes later, the police were pounding on my daughter-in-law's door with a warrant. But let me tell you how we got to this complete disaster, because, honey, this story starts 8 months earlier. And trust me, if you're watching this, you're going to want to subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, because what happened next will make you question everyone in your own family. Let me take you back to when I thought Nora was just the sweet girl who was going to make my son happy. Spoiler alert, I've never been more wrong about anything in my entire life. 8 months ago, I was Margaret Williams, 62 years old, widowed for 3 years, and apparently about as good at spotting liars as a goldfish is at quantum physics. My husband David died of a heart attack, leaving me with more money than I knew what to do with. A son who treated relationships like a revolving door, and a hole in my heart the size of Texas. That's when I got Max. 8 weeks old, all paws and golden fluff, from the local shelter. David always said we'd get a dog someday, but someday never came for him. Max became my shadow, my alarm clock, my therapist, and honestly, better company than most humans I know. My son Tyler has always been, how do I put this diplomatically? If making poor romantic choices was an Olympic sport, Tyler would have enough gold medals to open his own jewelry store. He's 32, works in tech when the mood strikes him, and has a supernatural ability to find women who see dollar signs where his personality should be. But he's my son, and despite his talent for romantic disasters, I love him more than chocolate, which, for the record, is saying something. That's why when he brought Nora home after 4 months of dating, I tried so hard to like her. Really, I did. She was stunning. I mean, stop traffic and cause accidents gorgeous. Long dark hair, green eyes, a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. Definitely in a different league than Tyler, if I'm being brutally honest. But I told myself money makes funny things happen. And if my son was finally happy, who was I to judge his upgrade? The first red flag came courtesy of Max, my sweet, friendly dog who loved everyone from the mailman to the grocery store clerk, took one look at her and started growling like she was wearing a "I hate dogs" t-shirt. "Max, stop that!" I scolded, grabbing his collar. "I'm so sorry, Nora. He never does this. He's usually such a friendly boy." Looking back now, I want to travel back in time and smack myself. Dogs can smell bad intentions like we smell burned toast, and I should have trusted his judgment over my desire to be polite. I peppered Nora with questions. Where was she from? What was her family like? What did she do for work? She said she'd lost her parents young, was raised by her uncle, worked in marketing. When I pressed for more details, she smoothly redirected like a politician avoiding scandal, pointing to a photo on my mantel. "Is that you and David?" she asked, looking at our picture from the confectionery class where we met. And here's where I made my first major mistake. I melted like butter on hot toast. Told her the whole romantic story about how David enrolled in that baking class just to get close to me, how he couldn't tell flour from sugar but stayed anyway, how cherry pie became our dessert because it was the first thing we successfully made together without burning down the kitchen. "That's so romantic," she said, and I swear I saw what looked like genuine emotion in her eyes. What I didn't know then was that she was probably calculating exactly how to use that information against me later. Tyler was already talking marriage after 4 months. I told him it was too soon, But Nora started getting this edge in her voice whenever I suggested they slow down, like I was just some interfering old woman who couldn't mind her own business. 2 months later, they were engaged. Because apparently, my son's idea of taking it slow is the relationship equivalent of a NASCAR race. And 2 months after that, they were married. Which brings us to the timeline of this complete disaster. The wedding was like something out of a magazine. Beautiful, expensive, and weirdly artificial. Kind of like those perfect plastic display cakes at the bakery that look delicious until you realize they're completely fake. Nora had exquisite taste and apparently an unlimited budget, which should have been red flag number 2 since she claimed to work in marketing for a small company. But hey, maybe she was really good at budgeting, or maybe she had rich relatives, or maybe I was just an idiot. Spoiler alert, it was option 3. Something felt off from the moment I walked into that venue. First, there was no family on her side. None. Zero. Zilch. Just friends, she said, because her uncle couldn't travel due to health issues. Now, I've been to a lot of weddings in my 62 years, and I've never seen a bride's side that looked like a casting call for a soap opera. These friends were all gorgeous, perfectly dressed, and had this weird quality like they were performing in a play rather than celebrating someone they actually knew. I tried mingling, being the gracious mother of the groom, when I struck up a conversation with her uncle's replacement, a distinguished man in his 50s who introduced himself as Thomas. "So you're Nora's uncle?" I asked, making polite conversation. "Oh, I'm not really her uncle," he laughed. "I'm her accountant. Family friend, you know. She asked me to walk her down the aisle since her real uncle couldn't make it." Accountant. Okay, that made sense, I guess. But something about his face nagged at me like a popcorn kernel stuck in your teeth. Had I seen him somewhere before? Tyler looked genuinely happy, though. Probably the most relaxed I'd seen him since high school. Nora was working the room like a professional politician, graceful and charming with everyone. Maybe I really was just being a paranoid old woman. But as I watched them cut the cake, cherry, of course, in honor of David's memory, as Nora sweetly put it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was watching the world's most expensive performance. During the reception, I noticed how Nora's friends all seemed to know each other, but called her Sweetie and Han instead of her actual name. Like they'd just met her that morning and were improvising their way through conversations. When I mentioned this to Tyler, he just shrugged. "She has a lot of work friends, Mom. You know how corporate networking is." No, Tyler, I didn't know how it was. My work friends knew my middle name, my coffee order, and exactly which stories would make me laugh until I snorted. These people looked like they'd been hired from central casting. But it was Tyler's wedding day, and he was glowing like a Christmas tree. So I smiled, danced with my new daughter-in-law, and told myself I was overthinking everything. 2 months later, when that cherry pie nearly killed my dog, I realized I hadn't been overthinking anything at all. If anything, I'd been underthinking, which for someone my age is practically a crime. 2 months after the wedding, I was starting to think maybe I'd been too harsh in my judgment. Nora and Tyler seemed genuinely happy, and she'd been nothing but sweet to me since their honeymoon. Maybe I really had been channeling my inner conspiracy theorist for no good reason. That Tuesday morning, my doorbell rang at exactly 10 a.m. The delivery guy handed me a white bakery box tied with a perfect ribbon. Inside was the most gorgeous cherry pie I'd ever seen. Lattice crust, golden brown, with little heart-shaped cutouts that probably took hours to make. The note attached made me feel like the world's biggest witch for ever doubting her. I saw fresh cherries at the farmer's market and thought of you and David's story. I spent all morning making this, and I hope it brings back sweet memories. Love, Nora. I actually teared up a little. Here she was, honoring my late husband's memory with a homemade pie that probably took half her day to make. I immediately texted her, "It's beautiful, honey. Thank you so much." "You're an angel," she responded with heart emojis, and "can't wait to hear how it tastes." I decided to make it special, real coffee in the French press, my good china, maybe call Tyler to come over and share it with me. You know, the whole production. I left the pie on the kitchen counter and went to grind coffee beans, planning the perfect afternoon. I was only gone for maybe 2 minutes, but that was all it took. Max has always been opportunistic about food, but he'd never actually jumped on the counter before. I heard the telltale scraping of claws and turned to see him with his face buried in that beautiful pie, tail wagging like he'd discovered buried treasure. "Max, no!" I grabbed him, pulling him away from the demolished corner. "Bad dog! That's not for you!" But honestly, I wasn't that upset. He'd only gotten a small piece, and I could just cut around the damage. Dogs will be dogs, right? I put him in the living room with a stern lecture about counter-surfing and went back to my coffee preparation. 5 minutes later, I heard the most terrifying sound of my life, like someone trying to breathe through a collapsed straw. Max was on the floor, panting so hard his whole body was convulsing, drool pooling around his head, his eyes wide with pure panic. I've never been so scared in my entire life. I somehow managed to scoop up all 70 pounds of him and get him into my car, calling Tyler and Nora frantically while driving like a maniac to the emergency vet. Neither of them answered, which at the time I thought was just bad timing. Dr. Rodriguez took one look at Max, and I knew from her expression that this wasn't just a case of too much dessert. They rushed him to the back immediately, started IVs, drew blood for emergency testing. I was left in that sterile waiting room with nothing but a TV, droning some commercial, and my worst fears for company. That's when fate decided to give me a little breadcrumb that would unravel everything. There on the screen, grinning at me in a furniture store commercial, was Thomas, Nora's accountant uncle from the wedding. "Hi, I'm Tom Mitchell, and at Mitchell's Furniture, we believe your home should tell your story." My blood went colder than a Minnesota winter. That wasn't an accountant. That was a local actor I'd been seeing in commercials for years. If Thomas wasn't really her uncle, who else at that wedding had been lying to my face? The blood test results came back after what felt like several lifetimes, but was probably only 2 hours. Dr. Rodriguez's face told me everything before she even opened her mouth. "Mrs. Williams, Max has been poisoned. Severe toxicity affecting his liver and nervous system. The next 24 hours are absolutely critical. Poisoned. Someone had put actual poison in that beautiful pie meant for me. And if Max hadn't been his usual food-obsessed self, I'd probably be the one fighting for my life right now. Can you save him?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. "We're doing everything we can. He's young and strong, but this is serious. You should prepare yourself." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I called the police from the vet's parking lot with hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. Officer Martinez listened to my story with the kind of professional calm that told me she'd heard stranger things before. "We'll need to test the remaining pie and speak with your daughter-in-law. This could be accidental contamination, but given the circumstances, we should check it out." 20 minutes later, I was standing on Nora's doorstep with 2 police officers, my heart hammering like a woodpecker on espresso. Nora answered the door in yoga pants and a messy bun, looking absolutely perfect even without makeup, because of course she did. "Margaret? What's wrong? You look upset." Officer Martinez stepped forward with professional courtesy. "Ma'am, we're investigating a possible poisoning incident involving a pie you delivered this morning." Nora's eyes widened with what looked like genuine concern. "The cherry pie? What about it? Is Margaret okay? Her dog ate some and was poisoned. He's in critical condition." And here's the thing. Nora's reaction was Academy Award worthy. Shock, horror, hand flying to her chest, the whole performance. "Poisoned?" she gasped. "Oh my God, is he going to be okay?" That's horrible. But how is that even possible? I made it myself from scratch, used organic everything. "Ma'am, we'd like to examine your kitchen and test your ingredients, just to rule out accidental contamination." "Of course, absolutely. Whatever you need to find out what happened." She was the picture of cooperation, leading them through her spotless kitchen, explaining every ingredient, showing them receipts from the farmer's market. They found nothing suspicious, nothing at all. The officers took samples anyway, but I could see in their faces that they were starting to think this was just a terrible accident. Food contamination happens, right? That's when I decided to test my theory about the actor. "Nora," I said as casually as possible, "I meant to ask about your Uncle Thomas, the one who walked you down the aisle. I keep thinking I've seen him somewhere before." She didn't even hesitate. "Oh, he does some local acting on the side. Commercials, small theater productions. He's actually quite talented." Such a smooth lie. So perfectly delivered with just the right amount of casual pride. The police left, probably thinking I was just a paranoid old woman grasping at straws. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because if there's one thing about us paranoid old women, we might be suspicious, but we're also stubborn as hell when someone tries to poison our family. The next morning, I was a woman with a mission and a dying dog for motivation. Max was still critical. Tyler was in complete denial about his perfect wife, and I had some serious detective work to do. I started with good old-fashioned phone book sleuthing. Tom Mitchell, from the furniture commercial, was surprisingly easy to track down. Apparently being a local celebrity has its disadvantages when someone's trying to investigate you. I called him, spinning a story about needing an actor for a commercial. We met at a downtown coffee shop, and I brought along some wedding photos like I was showing off family memories. "Do you recognize this woman?" I asked, sliding Nora's picture across the table. Tom studied it with genuine concentration. "No, I don't think so. Should I? She told my family you were her Uncle Thomas, said you walked her down the aisle." His confusion was so authentic it was almost comical. "I've never seen this woman before in my life, and trust me, I'd remember walking anyone down any aisle. That's not exactly something you forget." I showed him the wider reception shot, and his face lit up with recognition. "Oh, the Miller event. Yeah, I worked that gig. Good money, actually, but I wasn't anyone's uncle. I was hired to play a successful businessman. You know, add some class to the crowd." My stomach dropped faster than a broken elevator. "Hired by who?" "Event company called Elegant Affairs. They hire actors all the time. Corporate parties, weddings, fundraisers. Makes everything look more upscale. There were about 15 of us that night, all with different character backgrounds. So Nora's entire wedding had been staged with professional actors, which meant everything about her life was probably fake too. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. Marcus Webb looked like Central Casting's idea of what a PI should look like, but he came highly recommended. "Give me 3 days," he said after I told him everything. Those were the longest 3 days of my life. Max was improving slightly, but still critical. Tyler was calling constantly, alternating between worry about Max and anger at my paranoid theories. Marcus called on day 3 with news that made my blood run cold. "Your daughter-in-law's real name is Nicole Patterson. Professional con artist, at least 4 confirmed identities, married multiple times to wealthy men. 2 previous husbands died under suspicious circumstances. Do you have proof? Photos, marriage certificates, death certificates, financial records showing sudden inheritances. She's good, but she's not perfect. Check your email." I printed every single page, photos of Nora with different men, documentation of her various identities, news articles about mysterious deaths, bank records that told a terrifying story. Then I called Tyler. Time for some uncomfortable family truth-telling. "Tyler, I need you here right now. There's something about Nora you absolutely have to see." "Mom, I'm not listening to any more paranoid theories about my wife. Tyler James Williams, get over here immediately, or I'm taking everything I found straight to the police." That got his attention. He arrived within the hour, armed with attitude and ready for battle. "Mom, this obsession with Nora is getting embarrassing. She's been nothing but kind to you, and you're treating her like some kind of criminal." I handed him the folder without saying a word. Watching Tyler's face change as he flipped through those pages was like watching someone age and fast forward. Confusion melted into disbelief, then hardened into anger, and finally crumbled into devastating understanding. "This can't be real," he whispered, staring at a photo of Nora, or Nicole, kissing another man at what was clearly another wedding. "It's all real, sweetheart. She's not who she says she is. She tried to kill me and Max saved my life." But Tyler wasn't ready to accept it. Love makes you stupid that way, and I understood that better than anyone. These could be faked. Photoshop can do anything these days. Maybe this investigator is scamming you. Maybe someone's trying to frame her. "Tyler, look at the dates. Look at the death certificates. Look at her face in these photos with other men." He sat in silence for what felt like forever, studying each document like he could make them disappear through sheer willpower. "I need to confront her with this," he finally said, standing up with the folder clutched in his hands. "I need to hear her explanation. Don't tell her about the investigation. Please. if she knows we're on to her. But Tyler was already heading for the door, love and denial clouding his judgment. I have to give her a chance to explain. That's what you do when you love someone. 2 hours later, he called me, and I could hear the devastation in his voice. She admitted everything, Mom. Not the murders, but the fake identities, the previous marriages, even the actors at our wedding. She said she was going to tell me eventually, that she just wanted a fresh start, a real life with someone who actually loved her. And you believed her? I wanted to. God help me, I wanted to so badly. But then she started talking about the pie and… His voice broke. She said it was supposed to be an accident, that she put just a little something in it to make you sick, not kill you. She wanted you out of the picture, but not dead. Tyler, where are you now? I'm coming home. I told her I needed time to think, but I'm done. I can't be with someone who tried to hurt you. That should have been the end of it. Tyler seeing the truth, Nora exposed, justice about to be served. But I'd forgotten that cornered animals are the most dangerous kind. I didn't hear from Tyler after that phone call. Not for 6 hours, which was unusual for him, especially given the circumstances. When my doorbell rang that evening, I assumed it was him coming to talk through this nightmare. Instead, it was Nora, and she looked like a completely different person. Gone was the sweet, apologetic daughter-in-law. This woman had sharper makeup, harder eyes, and something in her hand that made every hair on my arm stand up. A gun. Hi, Margaret. I think it's time we had an honest conversation. Her voice was cold, flat, nothing like the warm tone I'd been hearing for months. Where's Tyler? I asked, my heart starting to pound. Tyler is indisposed. Don't worry, he's alive, for now. But that depends entirely on how this conversation goes. My hand moved instinctively toward the small panic button on my keychain, a security system Tyler had insisted I get after David died. One press would send alerts to the police, the security company, and Tyler's phone. I wouldn't do that if I were you, she said, noticing my movement. Not if you want to see your son again. But I'd already pressed it. The tiny device was designed to be activated discreetly, and I'd practiced with it enough times to do it by muscle memory. You know, Margaret, you really should have minded your own business. Tyler and I were happy. We had a good thing going. Until you tried to poison me. That was supposed to be a mild stomach bug. Just enough to put you in the hospital for a few days while Tyler and I took a little honeymoon trip. By the time you recovered, we'd have been long gone with a nice chunk of your money. She was backing me toward the living room, the gun never wavering. But your stupid dog had to play hero, didn't he? And then you had to hire investigators and dig into my past and ruin everything I'd worked for. What did you do to Tyler? Tyler is learning what happens when you threaten to turn in someone you supposedly love. He's having a little time out in our basement while he thinks about his priorities. I needed to keep her talking, needed to give the police time to respond to my panic alert. So what's the plan now? Kill both of us? The plan now is damage control. Tyler has an unfortunate accident. Grief-stricken wife inherits everything, and you, well, you're going to have that heart attack we've been postponing. That's when I heard them. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. Nora heard them too. Her eyes went wide, and for the first time since she'd arrived, she looked genuinely rattled. What did you do? What I should have done months ago. I called for help. The sirens were getting louder, and I could see the panic starting to set in behind her eyes. This isn't over, she snarled, but she was already backing toward the door. Yes, it is, I said. It's finally over. She bolted just as the first police car pulled into my driveway, but not before making one final mistake, dropping her purse as she ran, complete with ID, burner phone, and what would turn out to be Tyler's location. The next few hours were a blur of police cars, search teams, and the most terrified I'd ever been in my life. Tyler was found tied up in Nora and his basement, shaken but unharmed. Apparently, she'd drugged his coffee during their conversation, and he'd woken up downstairs, unsure how long he'd been unconscious. She kept saying she was buying time to figure out what to do with me, he told the officers, like I was a problem to be solved instead of her husband. The manhunt for Nicole Patterson, because that's who she really was, started immediately. Officer Martinez, who'd gone from thinking I was paranoid to treating this as a triple attempted murder case, was now leading a regional task force. She's smart and experienced, But she's also desperate now, Martinez told me. Desperate people make mistakes, and she's already made several. The dropped purse had been a treasure trove of evidence. Multiple fake IDs, a burner phone with text messages to unknown numbers, and most damning of all, internet search history for various poisons and their effects. They found her car abandoned at a truck stop 2 states away. Security footage showed her switching vehicles with a man who turned out to be another con artist she'd worked with before. But they had his information too now, and it was only a matter of time. Tyler was staying with me while he processed everything that had happened. He'd gone from thinking he'd found the love of his life to realizing he'd married someone who'd been planning to kill his mother from day one. "How do you ever trust anyone again after something like this?" he asked me one evening as we sat in my living room. "The same way you trusted people before, carefully but with an open heart. And maybe," I added, "listen to your mother occasionally. And definitely listen to your dog." That actually made him smile a little. Max was being released from the vet hospital the next day. Dr. Rodriguez said it was remarkable. Another few hours, and the poison would have caused permanent damage. As it was, he'd make a complete recovery. "Dogs are tougher than we think," she told me, "and luckier than they have any right to be." 2 weeks later, Martinez called with news. They'd found Nicole. She'd been arrested at a casino in Nevada, trying to charm her way into a high-stakes poker game with fake chips. Apparently, even professional con artists have gambling problems. When they brought her back, she looked nothing like either version I'd known, not the sweet daughter-in-law or the cold-eyed woman with the gun. This version looked tired, defeated, and older than her years. But that was fine with me. I preferred my enemies honest about who they really were. The trial took place almost a year later, giving everyone time to process what had happened and the legal system time to build an airtight case. By then, Nicole Patterson's story had become national news, the cherry pie attempted murder case that captured everyone's imagination. I still turned down all the interview requests. This wasn't entertainment for me. It was justice, pure and simple. Tyler and I sat in that courtroom every day, watching the prosecution systematically destroy any sympathy the jury might have had for Nicole. 6 marriages, 4 dead husbands, a dozen false identities, and a trail of financial fraud stretching back over 15 years. The most chilling testimony came from families of her previous victims. A son who lost his father to mysterious food poisoning. A daughter whose stepmother accidentally fell downstairs 2 weeks after updating her will. Another widow whose new husband died in a drowning accident during their honeymoon. Nicole's defense attorney tried to paint her as a victim herself, an orphan who'd learned to survive by any means necessary, a woman who'd never been given a real chance at happiness or love. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then they played the recording from my panic button, the one that had captured our entire conversation in my living room. Her voice, cold and calculating, talking about Tyler being indisposed, about me having the heart attack they'd been postponing. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Apparently, trying to murder your husband and mother-in-law doesn't generate a lot of sympathy, even when you claim it was for love. Guilty on all counts: attempted murder, kidnapping, fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The judge threw the book at her. 30 years to life, with no possibility of parole for 25 years. When the sentence was read, Nicole finally showed some genuine emotion. Not remorse. Pure, undiluted rage. She turned in her seat and stared directly at me with the kind of hatred that could melt steel. "This isn't over," she mouthed silently. But it was over. Finally, completely, absolutely over. Tyler reached over and squeezed my hand as they led her away in chains. "It's done, Mom." "Yes," I said, watching her disappear through the courtroom doors. "It finally is." Outside the courthouse, reporters were still trying to get quotes, asking how it felt to see justice served, whether I'd ever felt safe, what I wanted to say to other families who might be dealing with similar situations. "I want to say this," I told them. "Trust your instincts. Trust your pets. And if something feels wrong, don't ignore it just because you want to be polite." That soundbite made the evening news, which was more fame than I ever wanted or needed. But if it helped one person recognize the warning signs in their own life, Maybe all this craziness would have been worth something after all. 6 months later, I was standing in my kitchen making a real cherry pie, one that wouldn't poison anyone, when Tyler knocked on my back door. "Smells like heaven in here," he said, giving me a hug that lasted longer than usual. "Should smell good. I'm using your father's original recipe from the confectionery class. The one that took you guys 3 tries to get right? The very one." I pulled the pie from the oven, golden brown and genuinely beautiful. Figured it was time to reclaim cherry pie from that woman. She doesn't get to ruin our family memories. Tyler laughed, and it was the first truly happy sound I'd heard from him since this whole nightmare started. Dad would have approved of that attitude. Max patted over, tail wagging hopefully. I broke off a tiny piece of plain crust and gave it to him. "This one's safe, buddy. I promise." Life had settled into a new kind of normal. Tyler was in therapy, learning to trust his judgment again, and apparently dating a nice teacher named Sarah, who actually was a teacher and whose family actually existed. They'd been together for 3 months, and Max loved her, which was now my primary qualification for anyone wanting to date my son. I donated the money from the trial coverage to a victims' rights organization and gone back to my quiet widow life, but with significantly better security systems and a dog who was officially my hero. Marcus, my private investigator, had become an unexpected friend. We met for coffee once a week, and he kept me updated on the depressingly large world of professional con artists. "Any word from your friend in prison?" he asked during our latest coffee date. "She writes me letters," I admitted. "I don't read them anymore. Just hand them straight to the police in case she's planning something stupid for when she gets out." Smart. Women like her don't forget, and they definitely don't forgive. "Women like her underestimate women like me," I said. "She thought I was just a lonely old widow who'd be easy to manipulate. She forgot that lonely old widows are survivors by definition." Marcus grinned. "Remind me never to cross you, Margaret." That evening, Tyler brought up something that had been on my mind lately too. "Mom, do you think you'll ever date again?" I considered the question seriously. David had been gone for almost 4 years now, and while I still missed him every day, I was starting to think about the possibility of companionship again. "Maybe," I said, "but any man who wants to date me is going to have to pass the Max test first." Tyler looked down at my dog, who was sprawled across the kitchen floor like he owned the entire house. "You really think Max is a good judge of character?" "I think Max is the best judge of character I know. He spotted Nicole as a fraud from the very first meeting, and I should have listened to him instead of worrying about being a polite hostess. So if Max doesn't like someone, they don't even get past the front door. My dog's approval is now a mandatory requirement for anyone who wants to be part of this family." Max raised his head at the sound of his name, tail thumping against the floor like a furry metronome. I scratched behind his ears, and he rolled over for belly rubs. "What do you think, Max?" I asked him. "Ready to be my official screening committee for potential suitors?" His tail wagged harder, which I interpreted as enthusiastic consent. Tyler stayed for pie and coffee, and we talked about normal things: his job, my garden, weekend plans, whether he thought Sarah might like to come for dinner next week. Normal, safe, real things. It felt amazing to have a conversation that didn't involve poison or court dates or criminal investigations. As he was leaving, Tyler paused at the door. "Mom, I'm proud of you. For fighting back, for not giving up, for protecting us both. I didn't protect anyone." "Sweetheart, I almost got us both killed." "No, you saved us. If you hadn't been suspicious, if you hadn't investigated, if you hadn't been prepared with that panic button." He shook his head. "She would have killed you, inherited everything, and probably found a way to eliminate me too eventually." I hugged him tight, breathing in the scent of his cologne and remembering when he was small enough to fit completely in my arms. "We protected each other," I said. "That's what families do." After he left, I sat on my couch with Max's head in my lap, watching the sunset paint my living room walls gold and orange. The house was quiet, peaceful, safe. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Love you, Mom. Give Max an extra treat from me." I looked down at my dog, my protector, my early warning system, my very best friend. "Want a treat, buddy?" His whole body wiggled with excitement, because for Max, every treat was the greatest thing that had ever happened in the history of the universe. I gave him 2 treats, one from Tyler, one from me. He deserved them both. Hell, we all did. Outside, the world was still full of Nicole Pattersons, people who lied and cheated and hurt others for money or power or just because they enjoyed causing pain. But inside my house, there was just me and Max and the memory of David's laughter and the promise of Tyler's happiness. That was enough. That was everything. And if anyone ever tried to threaten that peace again, well, they'd have to get past a woman who'd learned to trust her instincts and a golden retriever who took his security duties very seriously indeed. Good luck with that. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.